Okay, members, we're going to get started with the Senate Subcommittee on Higher Education. We've got members in and out of different committees, so we will call roll here shortly. For our witnesses, we have 17 bills on the agenda. We'll take the opportunity to hear public testimony after each bill is laid out and explained by the author. Invited witnesses have 5 minutes to testify, and the public testimony is limited to 2 minutes. If you can use the kiosk system outside the hearing room to register for testimony, that's important before you come forward, and it's important to note that if you wish your position or written testimony to be of record, you have to be here in person to register to submit it, and we would need you to provide 7 copies to committee staff with your name on each copy. If you need help registering, please approach, and our staff up front here will help you with that. Members, we'll go ahead and get started. The chair lays out Senate Bill 969 by Senator Zaffirini. And Senator Zaffirini, do you have a substitute?
Yes.
If we'll recognize you to explain the measure and the difference between the original bill and the committee substitute language.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and members, Senate Bill 969 relates to tuition and fee exemptions at public institutions of higher education for certain correctional officers and jailers. Mr. Chairman, do you want the long version or the short? Mr. Chairman, do you want the long version or the short?
You know, what you feel is most important is what I would like.
That means the short. So generally, Senate Bill 969 would require public higher education institutions to exempt an undergraduate student who is employed as a correctional officer or jailer and enrolled in a criminal justice or law enforcement related degree program from paying tuition and laboratory fees charged for criminal justice or law enforcement courses. The committee substitute simply would add probation officers to the exemption provided by the bill.
Very good. Thank you, Senator Zaffirini. Members, any questions? Senator Middleton sends up the committee substitute for Senate Bill 969. Senator Zaffirini has already explained the difference between the original bill and the substitute language. At this time, we will open up public testimony on Senate Bill 969. And the chair will call Javier Salazar, Bexar County Sheriff. Good to have you here, Sheriff.
Good morning, sir. Happy to be here. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you all so much for inviting me in today. I am wholeheartedly in favor of this bill. It is no secret that we are in the midst of a staffing crisis with first responders across the board. Not just peace officers, but jailers, telecommunicators, and we're looking for any and all opportunities to help us out with regard to recruitment and retention of these 3 categories of TCOLE licensees. We recruit heavily at the Sheriff's Office in Bexar County. We recruit quite heavily from inner city schools with kids as young as 17, 18 years of age, where we start the recruitment process with them in hopes of hiring them right out of high school to begin their career as a jailer, and then hopefully moving on to a peace officer role or a telecommunicator role later on down the road. With that being said, this would be a valuable tool in helping us to recruit these young kids that may not have an opportunity otherwise to attend college and may not see it as a viable option due to cost of tuition. So we're hoping to help us out with respect to that. Another, as a side note, another way that this legislation would help out is, as we know, there's already a measure in the education code that would allow for peace officers. Again, this would just be expanding it out to jailers, telecommunicators, possibly, and other forms of licensee. In the aftermath of George Floyd and several other high profile incidents in the country, there was a huge call for better education among law enforcement officers. Examples were laid out about some of the European countries that require, in some cases, a 2-year degree before even being allowed to obtain a license as a peace officer. I think that's a bit of a stretch for here in this country, especially in light of the fact that we're having a harder time recruiting and retaining. But this would certainly be a great bridge to be able to offer these folks up an opportunity to get that college education. Again, who doesn't want a better educated first responder protecting and serving our community? So absolutely, I'm wholeheartedly in support of this, and I respectfully request that you all consider the same.
That's great, Sheriff. Thank you. Members, any questions? If you could, just state your name and who you're with one more time for the
Sure.
record.
Yes, sir. Bexar County Sheriff Javier Salazar, Bexar County, Texas.
Good, thank you. And you're testifying in support of the bill.
Yes, sir.
Members, any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Have a great day.
Members, we'll take roll at this time.
Senator Creighton,
Here.
Senator Middleton. Here. Senator King, Senator Springer, Senator West.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Okay, members, we have a quorum. We have one more witness, but just here as a resource on the bill, the Assistant Commissioner with the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board members, if we need any information from our resource witness. Otherwise, is there anyone else wishing to testify on, for, or against Senate Bill 969? With no further public testimony, we'll close public testimony on Senate Bill 969, and Senate Bill 969 will be left pending, subject to the call of the chair. Thank you, Senator Zaffirini. Chair lays out Senate Bill 427 by Senator Kolkhorst. Recognizes Senator Kolkhorst to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, it's good to be before this subcommittee, my first time this session, and I know y'all have been super busy. I have two bills today, and they both came from the district, actually. Senate Bill 427 requires every college or university to receiving state aid or support to provide an opportunity for students to take a Texas history course to help satisfy the history requirement for their degree or certificate. If a college or university does not offer their own Texas history course, they shall enter into an agreement with another higher ed institution to offer access to a Texas history course. As we know, we require 6 hours of history to be studied by our state universities or any university that receives state aid. And so it came to my attention that not everybody was offering Texas history, which y'all know we require in the 4th grade and the 7th grade. We have a lot of out-of-state students that are coming here, and I thought, Texas history is so unique and varied and diverse that I was a little surprised that not every university offered it. And so in my research and working with my staff, I, said, well, if they don't offer it, at least they could, enter into an agreement with another university that does do it. And so, kind of stumbled upon this with Jake Kolkhorst. So anyway, it was interesting, about what different colleges and universities do and don't offer. And I think that Texas is rich in its own history, being its own nation at one time. And we ought to teach a little bit about it, or at least have it. It doesn't require that you have to take Texas history, but at least you can be offered it if that's your interest.
Very good. And you don't have a substitute, do you?
I do not.
Okay. We'll open up public testimony for Senate Bill 427. Is anyone here wishing to testify on, for, or against Senate Bill 427? Okay.
Boy, you can tell when it's just home cooked and nobody comes to testify
It's-
for or against
It
it.
is moving that fast. Yeah. Chair will close public testimony on Senate Bill 427. Senate Bill 427 will be left pending. Senator Colquitt. Chair lays out Senate Bill 518 by Senator Colquitt, and you're recognized to explain the bill.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. This also came from my district with some concerned citizens in Senate District 18. As y'all know, Fort Bend County being one of the most diverse counties, not only in the state of Texas, but the United States. And some of the parents there became very concerned about the practice of our higher ed institutions that do not, since I guess it started in COVID, they are moving away from applicable standardized tests during the admission process. And so this bill requires every public institution of higher education to consider, it doesn't say that that is the deciding factor, but to consider how an applicant performed on an applicable standardized test during the admission process. If the individual is applying for undergraduate admission, such testing would include the SAT and ACT. If the individual is applying for graduate or professional school, it would be the GRE or GMAT, the LSAT for law school, or the MCAT for med school. The bill ensures that such standardized test will not be the sole criterion used in assessing an applicant's admission, but it would be one of the criteria used. Doing a lot of research on this, looking at what we kind of have as your top 6% now for our state universities. You look at those young people that maybe aren't in the top 6%, but maybe that they didn't do very well, maybe in your first 2 years. I always try to teach my kids and young people, I say this all the time when I talk to them, listen, when you go to high school, don't blow off your freshman year, because you create that baseline of what your grades are going to be, and it's really hard, as y'all know, to move it up or down meaningfully. And, again, I kind of lived COVID with my children, and Jake was one of those that did not have to have an ACT or an SAT. Of course, his mother made him do that. I would like to say his father, too. But that was something that I insisted upon because I think that it was good for him and would give him the ability to, in future years, if he chose to go to grad school or do other things, I just assumed that we would go back to that. To my surprise, we see universities that aren't doing it. And so many of the people that I represent in Fort Bend County, minorities, came to me and said, this is important to my children because they are excelling in these, and yet it's not even being considered. And so this just says you have to consider it as a part of it. So
Very good. Thank you. Senator Colquitt, any questions, members?
I have a question.
Yes, Senator West.
Frankly, I'm trying to figure out what the problem is, Senator Colquitt, when in the current statute, more specifically, 51.805B, and you have J, one of the factors that's supposed to be taken into consideration is the performance on the standardized test.
So, Senator,
I'm trying
if you speak just a little louder, I'm so
Really?
sorry. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, all right.
I think the microphone was far away.
In the current statute, there is already a requirement to consider the academic performance on standardized tests. But I'm trying to figure out why did we strike it and put it in another section of the bill?
If I understand correctly, I think that was a ledge council moving it in and repaginating it. Sometimes they strike it and then move it back up. So if you look at that J, the applicant's performance of standardized test, it goes to page 1 on line 18. And so I can certainly ask the drafter why he struck it there and moved it up. in the process.
Yeah, because I mean, the reality is that we strike it and we take it out of the section where other requirements for consideration are currently situated, and we strike it and we put it in its own category. And I'm just trying to understand why that is.
So, as we understand it, or I understand it, current statute requires universities to consider some combination of measures of these acts and not required just on an option. And so, when we move it up there, Senator, it makes it as not, okay, so if you look at page 2 and how it's one of them, but I think that they can pick and choose, moving it up in the code there to 51.805B, it makes it as it's one of the considerations. It's not you can pick and choose, which, as I understand it, where it is in J, it's kind of a picking and
I don't see
choosing.
that as pick and choose.
You don't read it that way.
Because
Well,
if you look at line 16 on the first page, general academic teaching institutions shall, it's not
Yeah.
discretionary, shall
But-
consider.
in looking at the code, it says shall also
Right, shall
consider.
also consider, right.
Consider all of or any of or a combination of the following
I mean,
indicators, socioeconomic indicators or factors in making the first-time freshman admission. So they don't have to consider it,
Where is that? Where is that?
and that is in, I'm going to go back to the code, that's in section 51.805. And if you'll look at in 2B, the general academic institution, after admitting students under section 51.803 and 51.804, shall admit other applicants for admission as undergraduate students. It is the intent of the legislature that all the institutions of higher education pursue academic excellence by considering students' academic achievements in decisions related to admissions. Because of changing demographic trends, diversity, and population increases in the state, each general academic institution shall also consider all of, any of, or a combination. And what we're saying here is how we move that up in the code is that the applicant's performance on a standardized test appropriate for the undergraduate admission because of changing different demographic changes. So we move it up in the code. It's not like a choice. It is that you shall consider it. It isn't the deciding factor. So that's how I read it. Because right now, as you know, since 2020, they're not considering. I know one law school that is not requiring the LSAT. It's an interesting thing.
I think I assume we have some resource witnesses to testify to that. There's been more and more studies done in terms of these standardized tests being predictors of success. And I'm pretty sure there are persons here that can testify to that and the importance of it. I better understand what you're saying now, and you just want to make certain that the standardized test performance is considered.
Is considered, that they can't pick and choose and say, well, we're just not going to consider that.
So they'd have to consider that plus the other factors that.
Right, in moving it up into the code, it's not kind of a pick and choose. And I do agree with you, Senator, in some of the studies that have been done. I know that...
I'm glad it wasn't a predictor for me, otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here. That's
I didn't do great on it. I didn't do great on
what
it,
I'm saying, so you wouldn't be sitting here.
right?
Yeah.
I didn't do great on it, but I got in. I was definitely, I struggled with standardized tests.
Right.
But again, I think it was an indicator, and you know what it made for me? It made me realize that I was a little bit behind. I was a straight A student. I took that standardized test, and I really had to work hard in getting kind of up to par. I did well in college. I was a college athlete, so it was the also missing a lot of class. When you play golf tournaments, you're gone for 3, 4, 5 days a week. It was quite a challenge. I do have to say that the University of California system did some interesting studies and standardized tests and who they benefit. And honestly, again, this kind of it did absolutely come from the district. And some of the people that I represent in Fort Bend County, in the Southeast Asians that I represent, that they were very concerned that some universities and some postgraduate schools are not considering their performance on that. So that was
Okay.
why I carried the bill.
Thank you.
Okay, before we open up public testimony, the chair would ask the clerk to recognize Senator Springer as present. We'll open up public testimony now on Senate Bill 518. Is there anyone wishing to testify on, for, or against Senate Bill 518?
Resources. Higher education.
Yes.
Sure.
Harrison Keller's. This is back left. Yeah.
Mr.
We have a
Chairman,
resource here from the coordinating board that could help us on.
a couple of questions, right?
Yeah. Commissioner.
Oh,
Commissioner here?
You know, always,
he was down in the back, wasn't he?
always willing to serve.
Yeah.
That's right.
Harrison Keller, Commissioner of Fire
Thank you,
Education.
Commissioner.
Happy to be here.
Thank you, Commissioner. Great seeing you this morning. Kind of give us just a synopsis of the current literature on the use of standardized tests for predictive success.
Sure. So, there, as you mentioned earlier in your discussion with Senator Kolkors, of course, there's a pretty robust literature on standardized tests and the use of standardized tests in admission.
Could you speak up some, please?
Yes, as Senator Kolkors mentioned, a growing number of institutions have gone test optional, so that students may submit their test scores for consideration if they feel that it will help them in the process. But not all institutions require submission of standardized tests. The standardized tests are generally pretty good predictors, especially of freshman grades. They're the best predictors of students' success in college. Actually, tends to be high school grades more than the freshman grades, as we've discussed in discussions about use of class rank and top 10% in admissions decisions. We do see that students who are from poorer high schools and students who are economically disadvantaged tend to have lower standardized tests. There is a pretty well-documented correlation there, and those students can be disadvantaged in the admissions process if you have a mechanical process. So sometimes, for example, like when we're talking about law schools, if you use something like GPA times your standardized test, then that'll disadvantage students who come from poorer high schools or more disadvantaged backgrounds. The students who are from more advantaged backgrounds also have more ability to participate in the test prep courses. I have a junior in high school who's currently in one of these courses, so I have a front row seat to what's involved with that and the expense that's involved with that, frankly, so that in this case, my son will be able to improve his test scores and his applications.
Okay, and so to make it real clear, how long have you been a commissioner of higher education?
For about 3.5 years.
Okay. Would it be a fair statement to say that what you just said concerning standardized tests is something that has been documented in the literature and also in terms of tests, in terms of studies over the past 50, 60 years? Or longer?
Well documented, especially over the last, I would say, 2 decades.
Okay. So, and nothing has changed, correct?
The main thing the tests themselves have changed, and so in the last few years, especially the standardized testing companies, especially the College Board, has really leaned into trying to redesign the SAT so that there would be sort of less of a correlation with students' socioeconomic background.
What's been the result so far?
That it's diminished, but we still see we still do see that correlation. We still do see that the students' performance in high school, their high school grades, still seem to be the best predictor that we have. But again, it's going to vary student to student. So sometimes you see students that have okay grades, but they really perform well on the standardized tests. And sometimes you see students who have very strong grades and they underperform on the state tests. That's been the rationale for why our institutions have gone test optional and let the students make that determination.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Members, any other questions?
I just want to follow up on like EdSource and some commentaries that I've read in regard to equity. Testing does not worsen disparities for underrepresented minority applicants and low-income students. Instead, large differences in high school grades and course taking are responsible for much of the difference in admission rates across groups. If testing requirements were eliminated, it would deny automatic admission to 40% of African American students and more than 25% of low-income and first-generation students admitted to UC, the University of California, today. And so, in looking at this, I think you can make these numbers look any way you want. And again, I truly am carrying this for my Southeast Asian, population in Fort Bend County who came to me with this issue to say, that we're concerned that all of this has been, it's optional now. And I want to clarify to Senator West how the bill was written. Was that if you look at page the end of page 1 and beginning of page 2 all the way through, all of those were factors that you could pick and choose from in that list. What this bill does is it moves it up and says that there are 2 that you shall consider. You can't pick from this list. These are the 2 that you have to at least consider. Then you can go to A through I, if the bill were to pass. But 1 is the applicant's performance on standardized tests appropriate for undergraduate admissions, and 2, because of changing demographic trends, diversity, and population increases to the state, all or any of the combination. So it just says you have to at least consider this. You don't get to pick and choose, but you have to at least consider this.
So two responses to that. I think, like to your point about the University of California institutions, I think it really hinges on how institutions use these tests. So there are some institutions that have said we're not going to consider standardized tests. So I think defer to the institutions to talk about this, but I think there's an important distinction between saying we will not consider standardized tests and saying that your test optional, we will consider the standardized test if the student submits the test. And so that's pretty significant difference there in how those tests would be considered in admissions. If I understand the bill as it's currently drafted, as I understand it, would require consideration of the standardized tests regardless.
Yeah, you just have to turn it in. It's not the deciding factor. It's, yes, you have to take it and it has to be a part of the process. So if you think about it, if you're outside of the top 6%, and you do great on your ACT or SAT, you just weren't great in high school. You might have chosen to be very involved in other things. It wasn't a priority. Your parents didn't push you for your good grades. And I know that you say it's optional, but I think that, again, this is an indicator of success, and that there are a lot of people that I represent that say, my child is great. They do great in school. They do great on these standardized tests, and this is something that should at least be considered as an opportunity.
So I just underline a point in your last. So I think there's, again, an important distinction to say, like, that one position would be to say the institution must consider the standardized tests if they're submitted, and the other position would be say the institution must consider standardized tests regardless. And so there's an important difference there. With my familiarity with our Texas institutions, again, we have some of the admissions officers here. I defer to them. My understanding is that when the tests are submitted, they do consider the tests, but they don't require the submission of the test.
And when did the not requiring the submission of a test start?
So we saw some institutions start to do that pre-COVID, but you were exactly right in your layout that it accelerated.
I mean, all of a sudden, and why did we do it in
Accelerated during
COVID?
COVID.
Because you couldn't get in to take it, right?
Yeah, they actually canceled multiple administrations of the test.
I
so
lived it.
students were not
I
able
loved
to
it.
take the test.
I loved it. Jake was a junior that year. This is when you take the ACT or SAT, dealing with all of his classmates. You know, I lived it. You know, we'd be scheduled for it, get canceled. We'd be scheduled for it, get canceled. But I have to tell you that when you have to take that test, and I mean, like, a test is not like, does it prepare you? Does it make you work harder? I mean, it does. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, it does. You can't just go in there and blow it off, right? If it's going to be a part of your admission process. And I just never dreamed post-COVID that we wouldn't be at least having some indicators. And I think that it hurts some minorities in being able to be accepted to the universities. And I represent these people, and I'm very passionate about this.
Members, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on, for, or against Senate Bill 518? Okay, with no further public testimony, we'll close public testimony on Senate Bill 518. Senate Bill 518 will be left pending, subject to the call of the chair. Thank you, Senator Colcourse. Chair lays out Senate Bill 2059 by Senator Hinojosa. Senator, you're recognized to explain the bill. I understand you don't have a substitute.
That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Senate Bill 2059 relates to nursing education, clinical site, and training grants. Texas, as a nursing shortage, is growing worse over the pandemic. By 2032, Texas will have a shortage of 12,500 plus licensed vocational nurses and 57,000 registered nurses. The comptroller reported that the quality of health care and Texas access to it could be at risk due to the nursing shortage. The Texas Center for Nursing Workforce Studies, Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, and a Texas Future Nursing Summit all point to the lack of access to clinical training and insufficient faculty as challenges to increasing the number of Texas nurses. They identified the lack of clinical training capacity as the primary obstacle to educating more nurses. Yet, little is invested in the critical clinical training needed for nursing. Senate Bill 2059 will address this critical need by creating 4 grant programs supporting nursing education and clinical training. Clinical Site Nurse Preceptor Grant Program, a Clinical Site Innovation and Coordinating Program, a Nursing Faculty Grant Program for part-time positions, and Nursing Faculty Grant Programs clinical training. Let me just give a real quick summary on each program, Mr. Chairman, if I may. The Clinical Site Nurse Preceptor Grant Program will provide grants to the nurse clinical training sites to pay $4 an hour add-on for qualified nursing staff to teach clinical skills while they manage their patient loads, also known as precepting. Second, the Clinical Site Innovation and Coordination Program will help retain and support nurses. It achieves this by funding innovation grants for clinical education sites to pilot retention strategies. Third, nursing faculty grant programs. Part-time positions will provide funding to address the need for more nursing faculty. It funds schools of nursing and community college programs that they hire qualified clinical staff to teach part-time. And finally, the Nursing Faculty Grant Program, clinical training will provide funding for refreshing the skills for nursing faculty who are wanting to come back into the clinical setting. And if I may point out, Mr. Chairman and members, there was just a study that came out last week. About 100,000 registered nurses in the U.S. left the workforce due to the stresses of the COVID-19 pandemic, according to the results of a survey published Thursday by the National Council of State Boards of Nursing. So we have dealt with this issue now for how many years. Every session would come up the shortage of nursing, and we have tried to address them in different ways, and we have not been able to close that gap in what our healthcare system needs, and the number of nurses are being trained. So this is another way of trying to bridge that gap to make sure that we have nurses to take care of healthcare needs here in the state. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Senator Hinojosa. Members, any questions? Okay, we'll open up public testimony now on Senate Bill 2059. Chair calls Stephen Brockman Weber, Heather De La Garza, Maureen Milligan.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Dr. Stephen Brockman Weber, and I have served patients for over 40 years as a nurse. I currently serve as the Chief Nurse Executive for Ascension, Texas, which includes Waco, Austin, and Central Texas area. I'm here representing the teaching hospitals of Texas in favor of Senate Bill 2059. Thank you, Senator Hinojosa, for sponsoring this important bill. The bill addresses what nurse faculty and nurse executives identify as the primary obstacle for the number of nursing students in clinical training. Clinical training is the hands-on patient care and healthcare training skills that hospitals provide to nursing students. I want to share with you some of the challenges clinical sites and other nurses face in providing the training while this bill is needed to grow Texas workforce. My institution, Ascension, Texas, with a workforce of over 14,000, including our primary teaching hospital, Del Seaton Medical Center at the University of Texas, and affiliated medical staff serves the public, private, and partnership as a safety net hospital for our region. This essential healthcare champion, it's better health and for the entire community with a focus on our low-income, uninsured, and underserved patients through primary care, wellness, as well as disease management and population health. What we are challenged when we face for retaining nurses is that we don't have enough clinical training capacity in Texas so that we can teach enough nurses. Clinical training is provided by one-on-one hospital staff to help train, known as preceptors. Preceptors work as full-time nurses, seeing their patients, and on top of that, agree to train students in a one-on-one setting while taking care of their own patients. This burden is sometimes something that preceptors choose to do, and today we do not have typically pay for that additional help. But after the pandemic, due to the loss of nurses to retirement and other stresses of the job, and our growing workforce and our shortage of workforce, it is more difficult for nurses to get enough qualified preceptors. Funding for this hourly preceptor add-on will help to recognize and reward those nurses for their work in helping train new nurses of the next generation. What I often hear from our frontline nurses is that they are precepting new nurses into practice along with being asked to precept nursing students. This creates a large burden on the nurse who is also taking care of their own workload of patients. Our staff enjoy working with nursing students, but it is a double burden in precepting both nursing students and new nurses. Direct state support provided to our care setting to support, recognize, and reward preceptors will help to increase the number of capacity that we can expand nursing class sizes and grow our nursing workforce. The bill also provides clinical site innovation grant funding to help retain and support nurses, including new nursing graduates so they can stay in the workforce. Retaining and supporting our current nurses is key to growing our workforce. With the new generation of nurses, the pressures of the pandemic on workload, salary inequities between staff and contract labor nurses, and the increased challenges of providing adequate support to our current nurses. Funding for nurse retention strategies through innovative grants can help to retain our workforce and train the workforce of the future, not only to staunch the loss of nurses in the workforce, but also to support the resilience of today's challenges that our nurses face. The Clinical Innovation Grant Program will help develop, implement, as well as to test innovative approaches to increasing clinical capacity and training through recruitment and retention. Finally, the lack of faculty in improving coordination between schools of nursing and nursing workplaces is also identified as a challenge in the nursing workforce. This grant provides funding for community colleges and other programs to hire qualified clinical staff nurses to choose to work part-time, and also provides funding for clinical training refreshers for nurse faculty to train that. This will increase nurse faculty, the support needed to coordination between nursing faculty and nursing practice. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Good. Members, any questions? Good. Thank you. Appreciate it. Go ahead.
Good morning, Chairman Crichton and Senators. My name is Heather De La Garza, and I'm the Assistant General Counsel for the Texas Hospital Association. I'm proud to testify this morning on behalf of THA and its more than 650 members in support of SB 2059. Hospitals are experiencing significant workforce shortages, especially among nurses. We are seeing growing vacancy rates for nursing positions, posted positions remaining vacant on average about 2 months, and the reduction of services in many hospitals. These challenges present an unsustainable situation that threatens hospitals' ability to care for Texans. DSHS reports that Texas's RN programs rejected over 28,000 qualified applicants in the last 2 years alone because of a lack of clinical spaces and faculty. 73% of RN programs that turn away qualified applicants do so to a lack of clinical space. This bill authorizes a grant program to increase the number of clinical sites across a variety of settings and improving the quality of nursing education. 57% of programs rejecting qualified student applicants did so because they could not identify qualified faculty to fill positions. This bill creates a program to incentivize qualified clinical nursing staff to serve as part-time faculty. Further, the bill creates a program to incentivize clinical sites to employ nursing faculty, helping education programs retain their faculty and promoting the integration of didactic and clinical curriculum. Hospitals know that provider workforce shortages won't be solved immediately or with a single silver bullet. To that end, THA supports SB 25 as another arrow in Texas's quiver, along with the Nursing Shortage Reduction Program, the Nurse Faculty Loan Repayment Program, and the nurse scholarships proposed this legislative session, among others. This legislature continues to take significant steps to ensure a robust nursing workforce for Texans. THA thanks Senator Hinojosa and members for these efforts and the opportunity to testify today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Thank you. Go ahead.
Good morning, Chairman Creighton, members of the committee. My name is Maureen Milligan. I'm the president of the Teaching Hospitals of Texas. We've got a couple documents that are going out to you with a little bit of background on this issue. I appreciate Senator Hinojosa bringing this bill. It's a very important bill for nurse workforce. He also cited a report just a little bit ago about 100,000 nurses leaving the workforce. The data in that study also say that another over 500,000 registered nurses with 10 or more years of experience said they plan to leave the workforce by 2027 because of stress and the pandemic and the multiple challenges. So this is a real crisis, and it's actually getting worse, and the data shows that it's getting worse. So we really appreciate you bringing this bill. A couple of things about that we've worked with our nurse executives in the Teaching Hospitals of Texas, and they strongly support this bill and the strategic investment strategy behind it. Investments today largely focus on the schools of nursing, and that makes sense. It's kind of historical. You think nursing students, you think, let's go to the schools of nursing. That's important. That's critical. But about a third of their time is in a clinical site. So if you can't move them into clinical sites for the training they need, one, to graduate, but two, to be able to take care of patients, you can't graduate those nurses. So it's really important. And you've seen this in the GME program that the Senate started maybe 10 years ago, where the funding went to clinical sites, and you've seen the success of that investment in clinical sites, so that today we've reached that goal of enough clinical site places for graduate medical education. So what we're saying in this is that to be successful in growing the number of nurses in Texas, the didactic is critical. It's important to focus on that investment, but it's not sufficient to meet the needs and the growth of those needs in Texas, as we've heard about. The other point about what Senator Hinojosa is recommending here is that it supports nurses in the workplace. So the new nurses that come in and they need that mentoring and they need that training, you've got the loss of experienced nurses in the workforce, and so there's fewer nurses to be able to support the new nurses and train them and help mentor them and keep them. So without retaining new nurses, you're still not going to be able to meet the needs of Texas. So it's training, retaining, keeping, and supporting them. So programs that help nurses with resilience, and other programs to keep them there. So this program also, as Senator Hinojosa has laid it out, supports rural areas of Texas. It supports urban areas of Texas. It supports hospitals, which we're grateful for, but it also supports long-term care facilities and sites, any place that the Board of Nursing would allow for this clinical preceptorship training to be. Those would be the entities that would be eligible for this program. So again, the focus in terms of preceptors, that critical component, you heard the data about all the nurses leaving. So imagine now someone telling you, oh, in addition to doing all that you're doing, we'd really like you to take somebody one-on-one all the ways, all the things you do every day and train them. So what this does is just kind of recognize that and also reward it just a little bit. And what we've heard from nurse executives is that can be really helpful to, again, just that recognition and rewarding for the preceptor. So preceptor funding is the first thing, this innovation grant. Those exist now through the Higher Education Coordinating Board, but they're limited to schools of nursing and educational programs. That's great that they're there, but they also need to go to clinical sites because there's lots of ideas for innovation there in terms of different staffing patterns, how to grow your own, work with high schools and colleges, bring people up from housekeeping, other people who want to be in the clinical workforce but just need a little help to be able to make that shift. So that's an important part of the program. And then the focus to support part-time staff or clinical staff who think, I could teach part-time. Wouldn't that be great for me to share that expertise? A little bit of funding, not for the hospitals, but for those schools, those community colleges, to be able to support them coming over. And then again, for the staff and the faculty to be able to come over, get a little clinical refresh. We know that coordination, and you've heard this from Mr. Keller, that coordination between like the end user, in this case it would be the clinical sites for nurses, and the educational program, the didactic, they have to be better coordinated. Nurses in their studies and work identify that, support that. So that's what this second set of grants would do, is support that coordination, that integration between the on-site clinical work and then the didactic work that our wonderful faculty at schools of nursing do. So we appreciate this bill. We appreciate the importance of nursing, and appreciate your time and support for the bill.
Thank you, members. Any questions?
I have a quick point.
Senator Hinojosa.
Thank you, Chairman and members, and thank you for your testimony. For many years, we faced challenges in providing adequate funding for our general medical education programs, GME. So many of our graduates from medical school will leave the state and be taken up by others, New York, California, Illinois, and they will stay over there. We defeated the whole purpose of educating and increasing our medical school capacity. Now we have really increased funding for GME to match the slots that match the number of graduating students from medical schools. So we made that effort and be successful. Every session we increase to keep track, keep up with the increase of medical school graduates. And we're having now, I think, additional 3 or 4 new medical schools coming online. We need to make the same strong effort for our nursing to make sure that nurses can play a very key role for our healthcare system and actually support our doctors, who our doctors couldn't really function and provide the healthcare they do if they didn't have the nurses to help them provide the healthcare to our patients. So thank you for your testimony.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of the witnesses? Thank you very much. Chair now calls Elise Meyer. Please state your name and who you represent.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman. My name's Elise Meyer, VP of Advocacy with Leading Age Texas. We advocate for nonprofit long-term care providers like nursing homes, home health, and hospice. The testimony before me and the discussion today laid out really well the overall nursing shortage that's well known, but long-term care settings have been disproportionately impacted by the nursing workforce shortage. Prior to 2019, long-term care settings reported the worst nursing shortages in the country, and recent studies confirm that the problem has only worsened. Nursing homes, for example, have seen an 18% decrease in the number of nurses employed by us, and in 2022, the long-term care nurse staffing study shows Texas nursing homes report the highest vacancy rates for RNs. We appreciate the Senate working to address the nursing workforce shortage through initiatives like SB 25. However, the lack of clinical sites is equally important and needs to be addressed in order to grow the pipeline. The experiences of nursing students should also be diverse, and exposing students to various healthcare settings and patients is important. So non-hospital based settings, smaller settings like nursing homes don't have the resources or staff available to support nursing students. So this bill is critically important for us. It would open the door to be able to partner with nursing programs, to provide those clinical sites, to be able to really grow the pipeline, but also recruit and retain nurses. Often when nurses graduate, they haven't been exposed to a long-term care setting, which really presents a challenge for us to get them into our doors, working with older Texans again, and is really needed. So we appreciate Senator Hinojosa bringing this bill forward, and we ask that you vote in favor.
Thank you very much. Any questions of Ms. Meyer? Hearing none.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else would like to testify for or against Senate Bill 2059? Public testimony is closed. The bill will be left pending subject to the call of the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair now recognizes Senator Montoya to take up and consider Senate Bill 1350.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to lay out Senate Bill
What did I say about
1350.
Montoya?
Lamantia.
Lamantia.
Yes, sir, like
My
your
bad.
favorite Thea.
Montoya. Gotcha.
SB 1350 expands current tuition exemptions for first responders to include EMS providers employed by political subdivision. Currently, firefighters and law enforcement officers are largely exempt from tuition and lab fees for higher education courses related to their profession. This bill ensures paramedics are eligible for exemptions in a similar fashion. In Texas, since many paramedics are also employed as firefighters, they benefit from the emergency preparedness courses and tuition exemptions firefighters receive. However, these benefits are not available to roughly 3,000 to 5,000 EMS providers, as paramedics employed by standalone EMS departments are not eligible. SB 1350 fixes this issue and ensures paramedics are better prepared to serve our communities. It simply provides them with benefits other first responders already receive. We have two witnesses here as invited testimony and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay. I'm looking around, and I don't have any questions, so I guess we move forward. So I'll ask James Campbell to come up, and Selena, I'm going to mess up the last name. Shia. Okay, got forward. Please state your name and who you represent.
Good morning. I'm James Campbell. I represent the Montgomery County Hospital District.
Okay.
I've been with the Montgomery County Hospital District now for 5 years. Thank you for your time this morning. I appreciate it. Prior to my time at MCHD, I worked for the City of Salina Fire Department for 10 years. As you may know, and as the sheriff mentioned this morning, there's a national shortage with law enforcement and also paramedics, nurses we heard a little bit about just a moment ago. But in conjunction with that paramedic shortage, we're also facing historic call volumes. Unfortunately, that paramedic shortage and call volume is impacting us here in Texas. In fact, last month of March, it was the third busiest month at MCHD in our history, just for some perspective. This bill would not only create educational equity with our partners who we work with in the streets each day, but it also helps with both recruitment and retention. This bill creates a firm educational pathway for our paramedics to grow into our future leaders. As I mentioned, prior to MCHD, I worked as a firefighter for 10 years and actually had the opportunity to receive a college tuition exemption as a firefighter, and that tremendously impacted my career and educational growth for my future. I'm here today to advocate not only for our paramedics at MCHD, but for those who work for similar organizations across the state. It would be great to see other paramedics get the same opportunities as those we work so closely with each day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You may proceed.
My name is Selena Shia. I am a paramedic and captain for Austin Travis County EMS. I'm also president of the Austin EMS Association. I represent over 500 EMTs and paramedics. And what we see is that our firefighters and our police officers do have a path to higher education, which allows them to grow in the profession and become leaders in the field. In EMS, because we don't have this, we see often that a lot of our leaders are brought in from the outside. Chief Campbell came from the fire department
to run an EMS department. And we know that we created these tuition exemption programs in order to build the future leaders in public safety, and also to provide a higher level of service to our community. And so all we're asking is to close the loophole. When we exempt firefighters, we're exempting a lot of paramedics, because in most cities, the fire department also runs EMS, but there are just a few places, municipal agencies that are not part of the fire department. So we're just asking for the same exemption. And finally, we know that a lot of EMS agencies are having a really hard time staffing their ambulances. Alpine, Rawls, we hear about whole departments closing down and not being able to provide EMS in those rural communities in order to service their populations. And we also know that a lot of different communities in Texas are relying on EMS to be their primary medical care. And so everybody deserves to have quality public safety and quality medical care. And we really think this bill will help that. So that's why we're here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to testify for or against Senate Bill 1350? Public testimony is closed. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
And also, Captain. Bill will be left pending, subject to the call of the chair. Chair now recognizes Senator Sparks on Senate Bill 1987. Senator Sparks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and would-be members. In 2019, almost all colleges in Texas were forced to use one accreditor, the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, or SACS. However, in 2019, the U.S. Department of Education amended their federal rule that previously required all institutions of higher education to use a regional accreditor assigned to them. Now, colleges and universities can be accredited by any nationally recognized accreditor. This cleanup bill would simply remove the requirement to use SACS and replace that section with the language that allows the use of any creditor recognized by the U.S. Department of Education. So Senate Bill 1987 realigns Texas statutes with federal rules and makes it clear to all institutions of higher education that they are free to change accreditors. Ultimately, this bill will give our institutions the same choice that other universities enjoy in other states.
I understand. Okay.
Very, very simple, very straightforward.
Oh, believe me, I understand this one very well. Okay. Let's see, we are opening public testimony. I'll ask Commissioner Keller to come forth as a resource witness. Commissioner Keller, you've had to deal with the accreditation of universities throughout your academic and also professional career. Help me to better understand and appreciate the change that this particular bill makes and impact on higher education in the state of Texas.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, Harrison Keller, Commissioner of Higher Education. So as Senator laid out, this bill is really just an important cleanup to align the state statutes with the federal regulations that now enable the institutions to they can look beyond their current regional accreditor. They could be accredited by another institution. So the way that this works is the U.S. Department of Education has here the accreditors that are recognized. We at the coordinating board work what's called the state authorizing entity, where they have to get institutions have to be authorized by the coordinating board to be able to operate. But then there are these regional and national accreditors that the institutions have to be accredited by for their students to be eligible for Title IV federal financial aid.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Is there anyone else that would like to testify for or against Senate Bill 1987? Hearing none, public testimony is closed. Bill will be left pending substitute call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. That's it. We're going to stand at ease until we get the rest of the committee back. We're going. Obviously, everybody's at different committee meetings. Right. Thank you.
Okay, we'll resume business in the Senate Subcommittee on Higher Education. The chair lays out Senate Bill 696 by Senator West. Senator West, you recognize.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 696 seeks to allow the University of Texas at Dallas to raise its student union fee from $60 to $100 a semester. This bill exists because the student body of the university voted to raise this fee specifically to replace the university's student union, which was originally constructed in 1979. Additional space and services are necessary to meet the demands of UT Dallas' growing student population.
Okay, members, any questions? We'll open up public testimony now on Senate Bill 696. The chair will call Kruthi Kanduri. Tell me your name again, please, for the record.
Hello, my name is Kruthi Kanduri. I am a current junior majoring in cognitive science at the University of Texas at Dallas, and I also serve as the current student government president at UT Dallas. It's not every day where a college student will come to you and ask you to raise the amount of money that they're paying, but that's exactly what I'm here to do. If you've never heard of UT Dallas, our school is unique, especially when it comes to our students. Our student population is incredibly diverse, non-traditional, and very smart. Essentially, we're a school full of nerds. We've been growing at a rapid rate with 31,000 and more students currently enrolled at our school and expecting another large class of students for our class of 2027. Another thing about UTD is that we are a 70% commuter school. This means that over 21,000 students are students that drive to UTD every day, and some people driving more than an hour every day just to get to class. In between classes, students will try to find something to eat, find a study space, or hang out with their friends. The current state of our campus is that students are unable to eat on campus because it can take up to 30 minutes just to be able to order their food in our student union. Finding a table in the SU might as well be impossible, and study spaces have become more than scarce. The Association of College Unions International recommends student unions provide about 10 square feet per student. For a university that serves more than 30,000 students, our student union is 100,000 square feet, which is a third of the size that an adequate student union should be. Students are sleeping and eating in their parked cars simply because there isn't enough space on campus. Our university is growing rapidly, and with every new generation of students that come to UTD, there is more excitement, more engagement, and more interest in being present on campus and being a part of campus activities and organizations. The fact that I'm here today on behalf of the student body who voted yes to increase the student fees shows how urgent the need for a bigger and better equipped student union is. There were multiple forums held to inform students and to receive student questions regarding this referendum as well. This is an informed vote by the student body. Our student government has also written a resolution in support of the student union fee, and while we understand, probably better than anyone, how an increase in student fees can be frustrating to say the least, the understanding that the better facilities are necessary for UTD to continue to grow is why we voted in support. My little sister is graduating high school in May and has just committed to UTD. I want to know that I, along with my peers, have left the school better than when we came into it, and I want my little sister, along with the countless future generations of comets, to be able to experience a better UTD and be inspired to leave the university better than they came into it themselves. Thank you so much for your time, and I sincerely hope you consider voting in favor of this bill.
Okay, members, questions?
Yeah.
Senator Springer.
Thank you. And I had the chance to tour it. Great university, great stuff. I love the little robots that run around. They're delivering food and stuff. It's a little wild doing that. But so what are you studying?
I'm a cognitive science major with a concentration in artificial intelligence.
All right. Well, thank you for coming down here and testifying today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, for being here.
Yeah, appreciate your testimony. Members, no other questions. Is anyone else wishing to testify on, for, or against Senate Bill 696? With no further public testimony, we'll close public testimony on Senate Bill 696, and Senate Bill 696 will be left pending, subject to the call of the chair. Thank you, Senator West. The chair lays out Senate Bill 1565 by Senator Hughes. Senator Hughes, do you have a substitute?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do.
Senator Springer sends up committee substitute for Senate Bill 1565, and the chair recognizes Senator Hughes to explain the difference between the original measure and the substitute language.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank you and your excellent staff and your members for working with us to hear this bill. I know it's an especially heavy session for you and your team, for this committee, so thank you for allowing this important issue to get the attention it deserves. We've all been concerned about media reports and other information that we've received about theft of intellectual property, intellectual capital more broadly. And we know there are some foreign powers that are aggressively seeking to steal intellectual property, and our universities are a great place to do that. And so our universities, of course, want to be open, want to have research and deal with other countries and scholars and students from everywhere. So drawing that fine line between allowing and encouraging that while protecting national security and important intellectual property is what this bill is about. A member of my team became aware of this last session and got in contact with the FBI. They had a briefing for us. I can't talk about what was in the briefing, but they had a briefing that was very sobering, and other members of the legislature and legislative staff have had a similar briefing since that time. And so we've learned a lot about what Texas is doing. And so Senate Bill 1565 lays the groundwork for creating a secure and collaborative environment among higher education institutions by requiring the governing body of each to establish a policy framework that addresses research security. The policy framework must do three things: address compliance with ethical, legal, regulatory, and contractual requirements, promote an organizational culture of compliance in relation to federal requirements and federal funding, and designate a research security officer responsible for the handling of classified material. And Mr. Chairman, as you stated, I have a committee substitute. It makes the draft a legislative council draft. It also adds the requirement that the designated research security officer meet annually at the Academic Security and Counter-Exploitation Program seminar offered by Texas A&M University. And I'm not a Texas A&M graduate. We're thankful for all our institutions of higher education, our flagship institutions, every single one, public and private. I must say what we've learned in our work is that Texas A&M is leading the country on this issue, and we're blessed by that, and so we want to encourage that in our institutions to work together, and there are resource witnesses here to discuss this further. But that's what the bill does, and I thank you for the hearing.
Good. Thank you, Senator Hughes. Members, any questions? Okay, we'll open up public testimony now on Senate Bill 1565, and the chair will call Kevin Gamache, Associate Vice Chancellor and Research Security Officer at Texas A&M University. Texas A&M University System. Thank you.
So,
if you could state your name,
my name
and
again.
who you represent.
I am Dr. Kevin Gamache. I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor and Chief Research Security Officer for the Texas A&M University System. I'm testifying on this legislation as a resource for Senate Bill 1565 by Senator Hughes. Good morning, Chairman Creighton, Vice Chair Middleton, members of the subcommittee. I appreciate this opportunity to be here today to discuss a very unique challenge. The challenge that universities are facing in protecting the nation's cutting-edge technology and national security in the very open environment of academia. With over 4 decades of experience protecting our national security, first as an Air Force nuclear maintenance officer, now in my current role for 18 years, and as an adjunct faculty member at Texas A&M University, I'm glad to have this opportunity to bring these perspectives to this critical issue. The A&M system is one of the largest higher education systems in the nation, with 11 universities and 8 state agencies representing more than 165,000 students and $1.2 billion in research expenditures. Our flagship campus in College Station is proud to be the choice of international students from 127 countries. More than 3,800 students, the most of any public university in the United States, participate in international opportunities. We have a global network of faculty who contribute to our research, teaching, and scholarship missions. We've been a cleared defense contractor for the Department of Defense and Department of Energy since 1974, and have amassed 7 straight superior ratings during annual Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency security vulnerability assessments. We've received 4 prestigious DoD awards for security management and counterintelligence excellence. And I tell you this to establish our credibility as a system dedicated to protecting sensitive information in an open environment dedicated to research. Texas A&M Chancellor John Sharp has said, "We intend to be a leader in protecting national interests and the sensitive work the Texas A&M system does in service to our country," end quote. We've worked hard since 2016 to make that commitment a reality. The Texas A&M University System Board of Regents established my office, the Research Security Office, at the A&M system level in 2016. The RSO provides oversight, coordination, and technical assistance on the research security effort for the entire A&M system. Our responsibilities include security management for our classified and controlled unclassified information, as well as our export-controlled research. We also conduct a very robust due diligence program to ensure that we know who we're collaborating with, who's funding those collaborators, and whether there's a state-sponsored nexus to that collaboration. And if there is, to make recommendations on mitigating measures to be incorporated to protect our research enterprise. The RSO also develops and is the focal point for research security and export control related training across the A&M system. We've developed a very comprehensive policy framework to ensure our researchers understand their obligations to protect our research enterprise. In addition to our overarching security policy, the A&M system, along with each system member, have developed integrated policies for external employment, foreign travel, conflict of commitment, and financial conflict of interest, all designed to ensure our faculty and staff correctly disclose and manage relationships with foreign collaborators. Additionally, we have created a global engagement policy that ensures any formal agreement with China, Russia, Iran, or North Korea receives a thorough due diligence review and is approved at the A&M system level. The A&M system is also taking a national level leadership role in the research security. We've established the Academic Security and Counter-Exploitation Program in 2017, which now has more than 180 universities participating, and we sponsor an annual conference that had over 400 participants this year. So thank you for this opportunity, and I would welcome your questions.
Members' questions? Senator Springer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned you had 4 countries you go to a higher level with. How many countries have you detected, potentially foreign espionage or interference?
We use those 4 countries because they are recognized by several different U.S. government agencies, including the Department of Defense, as those 4 countries that are most frequently identified for threat of technology transfer. And I will say that of those 4 countries, 2 of them are of particular concern, the first being China, the second is Russia, although we have no research relationships with Russia at this point in time as a result of their invasion of Ukraine. So,
And I noticed in the bill that the RSOs get together once a year to discuss topics. Is there anything that we should have in here that says, when something is detected to a level that you think you found it, that you share it with the other universities, RSOs, to make sure that they're aware that, this is where they're trying to come into, whether it's electrical engineering, nuclear engineering,
Right.
whatever the case may be?
So the organization that we established, the Academic Security and Counter-Exploitation Program, is designed specifically for universities to work with universities. We do have some federal government partnerships from the FBI, from DHS, from Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. They are all members of our executive committee. But this is primarily a university-led organization. We have an executive committee of 10 R1 universities, and the whole focus of that organization is to share information amongst universities.
And that's what I want to make sure is,
Yes, sir.
That whether you're using another organization that feeds up to even do national, but it gets back to the UNTs, the U of H's, Texas Tech, all the other systems as well.
Yes. We publish a weekly publication, an open source media summary that is going out to over 3,000 individuals on a weekly basis.
Thank you very much. It's very important we protect these things.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator West.
Mr. Gamache, what is your role there at A&M?
I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor and Chief Research Security Officer.
Now, in terms of Dr. Gamache. Okay. That means you're a PhD? PhD?
Yes, sir.
Poor, hungry, and determined, right? I had to use that one, okay?
At one time.
At one time. That was good. That was good. Now, in terms of students, in terms of the program, is the program also training students to be a part of it, or what?
We work with the individual universities, and they train their
students.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. So we have a pipeline of young people that we are making certain have the skill sets necessary to carry this work on.
Our goal is to ensure that, particularly with the graduate students and young faculty members, that we establish a culture of security so that as they grow into principal investigators, this is no longer a foreign concept to them. It's second nature as an integral part of how they run their research operations.
How are other states dealing with this issue?
We have not seen another state adopt something like the proposed bill on a statewide basis. There are individual pockets of excellence in every state, mostly that have been created through the Academic Security and Counter-Exploitation Program.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gamache.
Any other questions, members? Appreciate your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else wishing to testify on, for, or against Senate Bill 1565? With no further testimony, we'll close public testimony on Senate Bill 1565. Senator Springer moves adoption of the committee substitute for Senate Bill 1565. Any objection? Hearing none. Committee substitute's adopted. Senate Bill 1565 will be left pending.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Subject to the call of the chair. Thank you, Senator Hughes. Chair lays out Senate Bill 601 by Senator Birdwell. And Chair will ask Senator West to explain the measure on his behalf.
Members, Senate Bill 601 grants Texas State Technical College at Red Oaks campus the statutory flexibility to operate multiple sites across Ellis County. The institution opened up in Red Oak in 2013, and then as a fully fledged campus in 2015. The campus offers 8 programs at the campus: electrical power and controls, precision machining technology, and several others. And so this particular bill will allow them to operate as a collective unit of one or more locations.
Okay, thank you, Senator West. Members, we're going to hold right there and go ahead and head to the floor. And we will open up public testimony upon adjournment on the Senate floor on Senate Bill 601 when we return. The Senate Subcommittee on Higher Education will stand in recess, subject to the call of the chair.